I obviously love tattoos. It's no surprise. And these are the ones you can see. There's plenty you can't. And what I love about tattoos is they're unique, they have artistry, but what I really love about them is the stories that they tell. Most people have stories connected to tattoos, whether it's a dumb, drunken night with friends, or it's some memorial to a loved one, or it commemorates a moment in their life and their time. I want to tell you the origin story of the tiniest tattoo that I have. It's not the prettiest, it's not the fanciest, it's definitely not the most expensive, but it's the one that has so much meaning and power for me. Its origin starts in my senior year of high school. And my senior year of high school was a pretty typical senior year of high school at the beginning. I worried about a boyfriend, grades, where I was gonna go to college, what dress I was gonna wear to homecoming. So just pretty typical and normal. The normalcy didn't last long. About November, my mom got diagnosed with cancer. And me being the oops baby and the one that was much younger than my sisters, was really the only one home anymore. My sisters were older, they had kids, they were off living their own lives, and so I became my mom's caretaker. Now, mind you, in the early months, cancer never left her lips. That word that has such visceral feelings for people never actually left her lips. It was a lump, it was a thickening, it was something the doctors needed to pay attention to. As most cancer journeys start, they start with surgery. We went through the surgical procedure. We laughed a lot because it was breast cancer, and so we laughed about how she would be lopsided and how now she could legitimately stuff her bra. So, but I had to learn how to empty her drain. I had to learn how to watch bandages and take care of things, because those drains kind of down the side. Nice note about those drains is they're much longer in the body than the size of the breast. And when you pull them out during a follow-up appointment, you can turn the loveliest shade of green. But dignity can quickly be restored with some cold water on your face, and hopefully the people in the lobby not noticing that you're walking out pretty pale. So that was surgery. That went pretty smooth, pretty easy. Then came chemotherapy. That's a much different ballgame. I teach my nursing students that chemotherapy is a bomb that we put in your body. And we know that it's going to get the bad cells, but we also know it's going to get the good ones. And as my mom went through chemotherapy and I went to her chemo treatments, we would praise the nurses that could get IVs on the first start. They would, if I could, I would hand them $100 at this point. But gold stars were usually our measuring stick. We even offered gold stars for the ones that got it on the third or fourth attempt. I can honestly say I'm a really good IV start now, but I wasn't at that time. We spent a lot of time in infusion rooms. I would bring homework to try and do and sit on the floor in between all the pumps and stuff. I would try and hide behind the chairs and all that kind of stuff. We would talk about the different hats that people were wearing and the different festivities that things were going on. You would notice when people weren't there because you got used to the patterns of who was there and who wasn't. I would try and focus on homework, but it was hard. And chemo wasn't easy. Unfortunately, my mom has struggled a lot with chemo. I went to a school of 2,000 kids. That's a lot of germs. And I brought home 2,000 kids' germs to my house every day after school. And as my mom's immune system got lower and lower, and I brought home all the germs, she would get sicker and rebound less. At one point, I came home early from a swim meet because I wasn't allowed to go swimming. Because of the rules of not being able to be there if you missed the practice the day before, and which was fine. And so I went home and I looked at my mom and she was in the recliner, and I knew immediately just that look. She wasn't doing well. And I put my hand on her, and she was so hot. And so my 18-year-old self decided that it was time to take my mom to the hospital, and I took her to the hospital. And this was not the first time we'd been at the hospital, and it definitely wasn't going to be our last. And so, again, we kind of joked with the ER nurses and about whether they would get it on the IV on the first start. They didn't, but they got it on like the third or fourth. We didn't have to call in the anesthesiologist, so we knew they were pretty skilled. Okay, but this one really took her down. I slept in the recliner next to her, and I could see that just the spark wasn't there, right? I mean, we're pretty pasty white people, so we can't say like we were pale, but even more pale than normal. And so she just really struggled. And so one time while she slept, I decided I had a friend come, and she had brought me ant tattoos that were an armband, and from Chuck E. Cheese when that was a thing. And so I was like, while my mom slept, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna cut these apart, and I cut them apart, and then I took off her hat while she slept, and I put ants on her head, right? I didn't put them behind her because no one really likes a kick me sign, so I didn't want to put them back here, but I kind of put them up in the front, and then I slipped her hat back over, and then just kind of waited and just was like, let's see what happens. She got up and had to go to the bathroom, and me being me, I just unplugged all the things and took her with me. Mind you, I'm 18, and I know how to run IV pumps really well at that point in time. I'm not the nurse's friend. But I take her, and we walk her to the bathroom, and there's a mirror right by the bathroom, which is like the worst place for a mirror on a good day, let alone when you're sick. And she looked in the mirror, and she could see the tiny little ants, and she got closer to the mirror, and she got closer, and then she just looked at me in that face of like, what the hell did you just do? Right? And she goes, and I go, you got ants. And I'm like, but they're not in your pants, but we got them on your head, right? Like she laughed. She laughed for the first time, right? And all of a sudden, there was just a little bit more spark there, right? There was just a little bit more energy in the room that day. We got her back to the bed, got her there. And then the nurse came in, and my mom pulled up her hat, and she goes, look at what my daughter did to me. She put ants on my head. And the nurse laughed. She showed, during that hospital trip, she showed everything. She showed everybody all the ants, right? Every time, I think even the phlebotomist at like 4 a.m. when they come and draw your blood, she was like, look at what my daughter did, right? And it changed the mood, right? It just tilted it just a little bit, just to give us a little bit of that spark back, right? So the tattoo that I have, of course, is an ant. It's the tiniest ant. Now, in amongst this tattoo, obviously there's lots, but there's the 3 women that raised me. There's my grandma, Young, who is daisies for the amazing compassion that she taught me to have. The ruffled feather for my grandma, Ray Hope, who taught me to be a fierce advocate and nothing happens sitting down. And then the tiniest little ant, just to remind us, it didn't stop the hurt from happening. It didn't make the chemo work better. It didn't make us get better through the radiation. It didn't take away the challenges of me having to learn to give my mom injections. But it lifted a little bit off our shoulders. It taught us to remember to laugh, and just gave us a little bit of a breath during some of the really hard moments of our life. Thank you.